Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the podcast today. We're so excited that you're here, and we're kind of diving into a really deep rabbit hole, a niche of a niche of a niche. And that is, how do you get ready for the day when you're not the leader anymore? And those of you who know me know that I have kind of gotten into this question for a long time. Years ago, I started wondering, why can't churches do a better job of finding someone to follow a successful pastorate? And we started doing research and writing and wrote a book about it. And then another book, another expanded edition has come out of that. And now we're getting to do a lot of planning with churches and schools and nonprofits about, what does it look like to have a new senior pastor or exec director? So we're taking some time this month to dive deeper, because I know there are some of you out there right now that didn't think this was a question you had to consider. But now that the pandemic has hit, you've got a whole new set of glasses on, and you're like, man, this job isn't what I signed up for. Life's going faster than I thought it would. I probably need to start thinking about who comes after me. That might be when you're 25. It might be when you're 65. I'm surprised we're getting so many calls from pastors in their late 40s and early 50s that are saying, help me do a long-term plan. So on that note, I brought my friend Danny Wood in, who's 41 or 2, and just a shining light in the Southern Baptist Church. Danny, thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, William.
Yeah, no, Danny and I met a long time ago. I'll let him decide whether or not to tell the story of how we met. But we've known each other a while now. And Danny, we're getting to help walk alongside Shades and you as you all discover what God's doing and who's next. And I wondered if you would just take some time today and tell people how you got started where you were, because that was a really good story of transition. And then maybe walk us a little bit of your journey, and then we can talk about the current situation.
Okay. Thank you, William, and I appreciate it. Really, I was the beneficiary of a well-done succession plan for my calling here. Dr. Charles Carter was my predecessor, and he had been here. He was coming up on about 25 years. And in September of 1996, he came up with a plan that would be a transition plan. And if you can go all the way back to 1996, the pastors weren't doing that. They were doing the give you the 2-week notice, I'm stepping away, get the search committees, and you've got that kind of that dead hole there of no leadership for a pretty good while. He had seen that happen. He'd seen a couple churches that had really gone through difficult times with that dearth of leadership. So he came up with this idea of he would continue to pastor. Search committee would look for the pastor. Once they found me, then he and I worked together and did sort of a shared leadership. And we worked together for 11 months. And he was senior pastor and I was pastor, but the buck stopped on my desk. And what we did was, he said, I just wanted to walk you through the process as to how we do budgeting, how we get deacons, how we do these things. And so that's what he walked with me throughout the year. We shared the preaching responsibilities, and but I had all the leadership over the staff and deacon meetings, et cetera. And we were good friends, and we'd known each other for a long time. So it was a really smooth 11 months. And then I gave him he gave me the baton, and then I started running with it after those 11 months. So William, I was accustomed to someone thinking through and planning a succession plan. Mm-hmm. And so as I traveled through my life at Shades, after I'd been there a little over 20 years, I knew when you're trying to figure out when do you do something like this, in my own heart, I did not want to be the pastor at age 70. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of my end point. And so that would take me to 2023. And I said, no, I don't want to be here till then. So let's sort of back up from there. And really, when I got your book, I read your book next, and I loved the preface when it said every pastor is an interim pastor. And that was great. And that was a great way to kind of talk to people about it. And when I really started putting flesh on it was in 2016, Oksana came in and worked with us, and they worked with us for about 8-9 months. And it was a radical change. It was great. It was great. Everything they did with us, and mission statements and core values and all of that. But they asked the question, and they said, do you have a succession plan? And William, I kind of had one in the back of my mind, but I'd not fleshed it out. And so that was a great challenge. I read your book, and what I decided to do was in 2017, I brought in 3 men that I trust, that had known me for the full 20 plus years that I had pastored. And I told them I want to work through a succession plan that will be best for our church. I bought a copy of your book. Give you a big plug right over here. I gave you a copy of the book. It was a great starting point for all of them to read. We read through the book. You have some checklists that you need to go through in order to be ready to step away. We talked about all that checklist. Oksana had a boot camp of where you could go and learn about succession. And we traveled to Dallas, went to that for a couple of days. So the 4 of us were there. And so no one else knew about it. It was just me and these 3 guys. And William, from that point, I began to take what I learned from the boot camp, what I learned from your book, what I've learned to talk to others, and I began to formulate what I felt was a good succession plan and timing that was, I felt comfortable for me and for the church. It's a little bit different than what Dr. Carter did. And so I was trying to tweak and come up kind of with my own.
Well, I think it's worth noting. I've been to your church. I've met those 3 guys. Oh my gosh, I want to come back to that. Wonderful men, as we've sat down and put a map together for you. You know, when I pastored in Montgomery, Alabama. So I've been in Alabama, and arguably Birmingham is a very progressive city within the context of Alabama. But yes, people don't really think of Alabama as the cradle of change, right? It's not really its signature, right? It's easy to follow success. You just keep doing the same thing over and over. But this church is vastly different than when you took over from your predecessor. I mean, you've walked them through change and prepared them for change, even down to, Shades Mountain Baptist Church, I guess is the most appropriate way to say the name of the church, but you got shades.org as a website. I don't know. I mean, all those sunglasses companies that try and get you to buy a special online and Facebook, they'd all love to have your domain name. I don't know how you got them out of that, but I guess what I'm wondering is, as you were thinking through the future, how did you, as a new successor to a great pastor, balance the need to move forward and at the same time remember the heritage where things have come? How do you walk that tightrope? Because that seems to be the same puzzle today as it was the day you took over.
So you're talking about through all the ministry, or through the succession?
Through all the ministry as a young guy taking over, and my gosh, how did you walk them from what you inherited to what you're leaving?
Well, the thing with Dr. Carter, I don't want to go too deep, but when I graduated from college, I went in the business world for 8.5 years, and I was working in Birmingham. So I was working with AT&T, and I was in Birmingham, and I joined Shades Mountain. So I was a member of this church, and I've taught Sunday school. I was a deacon. And so I always kid Sunday school teachers now as I'm the pastor, and they said, hey, I'm going to be a Sunday school teacher. I said, hey, you can follow my path and be a pastor one day of this church. It's a great career path. So I knew Dr. Carter, and he conducted our wedding. He did my ordination sermon in ministry, and he was really my father in ministry. And when I decided to go into ministry, he was a guy I talked to when I was pastor at First Baptist Church Ruston. He's my go-to when I had questions. So we had a real good relationship there. And when we went through the transition, I had told him that my number one goal is to make sure that he finished strong. And he had such a great ministry. I wanted him to go strong, and he did, and it worked out really well for both of us. But then also know that I inherited, some sacred cows along the way, and he was very supportive of every change. But naturally, some people, it gets a little difficult. The advantage I had, William, was having been there
Mm.
for 6, 7 years. I knew the church, and I knew a lot of its history, so I could call on that when I tried to implement change. And my whole philosophy on change is you just need to educate people and talk to them about it. And once I believe you talk to people and you explain the why of change, usually they'll come along with you. And so I went kind of slow and steady, and would build it up, set it up, explain it, understand the why, and then we would go forward. And so, William, it was a lot of it was just trying to kind of get us up to date as we get ready, as we're heading in the 21st century. And the most important thing was after I've been there about 4.5 years, I just felt God led me to do 40 days of prayer and fasting.
Mm.
And we took the church through that. And it was at the end of that God gave me, if I want to put it this way, what we called the 2010 vision. And that was in year 2001. And it was a missions vision for what we could do as a church. And we had done a good job of writing checks, but we really hadn't done a whole lot of going out. So God gave me a God-sized vision I shared with the church, and that was that by the year 2010, we wanted to have missionaries serving in all 24 time zones of the world, that we would do ministry in all 50 states, that we would plant churches in all 11 International Mission Board regions, and plant 5 churches in the United States and 1 church in Canada, and adopt a focus city, North American Mission Board focus city. And one of my closest friends, who is now on our staff, was a deacon at that time. And he said, I got to tell you, I thought you were crazy. And a lot of people thought I was crazy, because we'd only sent out a handful of missionaries. I mean, we weren't some big missionary sending church. But working with a company called Global Focus, yeah, it helped us just get our focus right on missions, and we personalized missions. And I'm telling you, William, our folks, they jumped on it. And when we got to the end of 2010, we had done ministry in all 50 states. We had now planted
Wow.
7 churches instead of 5. And we covered all the 11 International Mission Board regions. And I'm a better theologian than I am a geography major. We covered 21 out of the 24 time zones. 3 time zones were in the Pacific Ocean. So, if I did tell my missions guy, if I was younger and as competitive as I was at my younger age, I would have put in an airplane and made you parachute down to Fiji and hand out some leaflets and see if you could lead a person to Christ, and I'd knock out that time zone. So, but it was huge for our church, and that was the biggest change. And then from there, we came up with different missions, visions, and it's been wonderful since that moment.
I tell people all the time, especially young pastors that are inheriting a church where somebody's been there a long time, the key to the future is in your past. Like, if
Yes.
you will leverage the wins of the past, you'll unlock power for the future.
You're so right.
And I don't know that I've ever seen it better illustrated than the room. Do you call it your vision room there in the church?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about that. Here's an idea every pastor ought to just steal and run with right now, because I've never seen anything so powerful. Tell us what the vision room in your church is and how you guys use that.
Yeah, we when we came, we'd done a lot of building programs here. When I got here, one of our greatest needs was the campus. When they build a new building, they would just put it next to the next one, so it's just like this. And the problem is, if you came in this building here, it was difficult to get to this building here. So we got with an incredible company that put us together a master plan. And so for my 24 years, it has been seeing that master plan become reality. So we've completely recreated this campus, and we had one thing left that had not been done, and that was the worship center. And the worship center was 30 years old. Dr. Carter had built it. It's a beautiful, cavernous building, seat about 3,200 or so. And but we just needed.
A crown jewel of the mid 80s in church growth and all that, right? I mean, that was
Yes,
spot on
yes.
hit.
Kind of looked like what the original Prestonwood had, Orlando, all those churches, they went with it. And it was good, but it was limiting to where you really couldn't do multiple services because people would just be bouncing around in it. And so somebody was going to have to make that change. And
let me put a fine point on that. Somebody's going to have to make the change to reduce the seating capacity in the room. Is that what you're saying?
That would be correct. And to and in fact, to make your lobby larger. And so what we did was, it was funny because when people would ask me about, are you going to do the renovate the worship center, I always said, next guy. I said, that's the next guy. I'm going to save it for him. And I said, I'm keeping a file, and that's number one on my file.
Next guy.
Well, problem is God really got a hold of my heart, and he began, and it's like he spoke to me. He said, Danny, he said, next guy can't do this. He said, you got over 20 years experience here. This is a very emotional building. And it takes a pastor sometimes almost 5 to 7 years before they gain the trust of the congregation. And so if a new guy came in, it'd take him 7 years to build the trust, 3 years to do the building program. It would take 10 years. And it was in sore need of carpet changes and other things. It was beautiful, in good shape, but it was still 30 years old. So a lot of things had to change. So I ended up saying, I'm going to tackle it. And it would be my last thing that I would tackle. And so in order to do that, we put together this vision room. We got the idea from our consultant. I think a couple other churches had done this. And it was kind of fun because we put together off of one wall, we had a timeline of our church. And it was like a plexiglass, really beautifully done, well laid out. And you could start at the left and look at 1911 when Billy Sellers met with children under a tree to do Bible studies, to how our church got started, all the way to 1926 when they changed the name to Shades Mountain, all the way up to Dr. Carter. And we had highlights of his, all the way through my ministry, through all the things that we had done. And it was really great to be able to take a person in and say, let me just show you the history of Shades Mountain Baptist Church, 100+ years of history. And then on the other wall, we had our core values. We had our measurements, some of the things we gotten from Oksana that we put together. And so it was just a wonderful room to sit down and talk to people about making a commitment to this program, which was called Next. So that was our vision room, and just a great history. Well, and I'm telling you, William, if I could just say this, this is where I knew that I was the guy to do this program, because no matter how old a member was that came in, I could relate to every single thing on that graph almost, because I'd been here since 1975. And so I knew all the Carter stuff and was familiar with the history before that. So it really made it for special time.
Two really important lessons there if you're listening, pastors, and thinking about succession. And I don't care if you're 30 years old, thinking about succession for 30 years from now, 35 years from now, 10 years, whenever it is. Lesson number one, before you leave, ask God, what are the things that only I can do? Because I think you're so right, Danny. A new guy coming in, they would have made hamburger out of him before he'd have gotten to the sacred cow.
Yes.
So, it's just, there's no reason to penalize the new person. And that might be, sorry, this is going to disrupt some staffs, but that might be having to have a hard conversation with a staff member who's been there forever and tell them it's time to move on. Why saddle the new guy with the, not picking on anybody in particular, but like the pastoral care guy who's been there 500 years. I mean, you can't fire that, or reducing the seating in a sanctuary. Are you kidding me? So ask God before you leave, say, Lord, what are the things that only I can do because of the compound interest I have with all these people? And lesson number two, look back to your past. I get so caught, Danny, in looking at the future that I forget to look backwards. And I remember a guy that used to serve with us, Preston Mitchell, who helped Ed Young, the younger, start
Hmm.
Fellowship Church, he said, you know, one of the things that Ed got right from day one is we took pictures all the time. So we could go back and look at the pictures of and not despise the small things and just remember
Yes.
where God had taken us. Because I sat in your vision room and I looked at all those pictures and then I saw your values and I saw your head and I was ready to write a check and or, you know, or Venmo you or whatever. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, because there's power for the future in the past. I mean, that's a powerful succession principle. I
Yeah.
just I thought it was a great room to sit in, and I appreciate you sharing the story. But
Hey, thank you.
hey, listen, you sat down with three guys to talk to them, and that sounds all great, but like, was there any struggle inside you internally to say, how do I bring this up? And I mean, you know, what's that like? And if there's anything you can share with people who are kind of worried about how to share that news or who to share with. I mean, you did meeting those three guys, you picked the right guys and you must have done it the right way. What were some things you struggled with or were afraid of leading up to that conversation, and how did it all play out?
Well, the first thing was, I knew I could trust them. And so
Mm.
most importantly was guys that I could bear my heart with and know that, 2 days later, it wouldn't be out on a Twitter feed that I was thinking of leaving. Now, it really wasn't that difficult once I had those three quality individuals, because as I sat across the table from them, each one of them were over 60. So they understood, and some of them knew, in fact, all three of them knew that coming up in the next few years, they're probably going to face this in their own business that they're working in. And so to me, that was very positive, because they're thinking through those same things. And so when I shared it with them, it's a little emotional, because, they love me and I love them. And they're like, oh my gosh, we knew this was going to happen one day, but we didn't think it'd happen, this soon. But it's just where I didn't tell them the purpose of the meeting, just so I wanted to meet with them. And when they all came up here and met in my office, that's when I laid out to them that I wanted to develop a succession plan. But the great thing was, William, is that at that moment, I was not saying, hey, August 15th of 2021, I'm stepping away. All it was then, William, was we need to start working on a succession plan.
That's so good.
And I want you guys to work with me, and I'm looking for your input, and to go like that.
I think that, having done several hundred successions now, the thing that keeps a lot of them from getting kicked off, and let me say this, the person with the most time in their succession wins. If you wait till you're 85 and maybe one day you're thinking about hanging it up, you got less time to work with. The person with the most time wins. And a lot of times the number one stumbling block to getting going is like, but I don't know what the date is. Well, you know what? You don't have to know the date.
No.
I used to think I'd read as a young Christian, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And I thought that was like those xenon headlights in fancy cars that see all the way down the road. But, it's really just a little lamp on a shoe that shows you enough for the next step. And I think that's so wise for you to not say, guys, we're talking about this date. We're talking about this time. It's kind of like, no one knows the day or hour, but Jesus talked about the day's coming.
Right.
We may not know when. So yeah. So as you think about moving forward, Danny, where do you see yourself in your own handoff? How does that look? Yeah. And by the way, those of you watching, we are searching right now for the next successor at shades.org. It's not a sunglasses church. It's a really great church in Birmingham. Give me a sense of what you learned from Dr. Carter and what you'd like to replicate there, maybe even some things that have changed in the years that have gone by that you might want to implement.
Yeah, there are a couple different things. First of all, William, when I sat down with those guys and we read your book, we went to the conference, and when I went to that conference, they gave you about 3 different models that you can go with, or at least consider. And so what I did was came up with like a hybrid of that. And so they agreed. I ran it by those 3 men, and we discussed it. And I said, I think this is what's best for me and best for the church, and they agreed on that. but my driving force for the particular time. Now you understand, make sure I'm being very clear. When I explained how I wanted it to happen, I still did not know a date. Okay. Does that make sense? I'm
Totally.
just saying, this is how I think it needs to be. And, I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk to you about the date. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. On the plan that Dr. Carter did was, the guy comes in, we work together for 11 months, and then we hand it off. And he had set it up so he could leave anytime between 6 and 12 months. I chose 11 because that's when he was going to be 62, and I just wanted to hit it at Social Security. So when I looked at that plan, I wanted to do mine a little different. I wanted to announce, and then I wanted to get a search committee and an incredible executive search firm to work with us on that. And so I wanted to get the committee and the firm and work together. And then as soon as they find that individual, that we bring him in, he preaches a view of a call, church votes on him, then he goes back and gives his church 2 weeks notice. And I will preach those next 2 weeks. And then after that second week, I'm going to be gone. Okay. For him, we would want him to he'd be on our payroll that first Sunday I walk away, and then he would move to Birmingham and not come for 4 to 5 weeks, at least 4 weeks, and let him get his family settled, move in. If he got kids, get them in school, get the house, get settled in, and give our church 4 weeks without me, and give them a little bit of time to grieve the fact that our pastor's gone. He's not on a video. He's not doing announcements. He's not preaching. He's gone. And so once they understood that Elvis has left the building, then hopefully after that 4th, 5th week, they start building momentum and excitement for this man to come in. The plan that Dr. Carter had, it was good, but it didn't give the church time to grieve because we were together. They saw him every Sunday. And then all of a sudden, after February, he was gone. I was still here. I'm trying to have a celebration. They're trying to have a funeral. And it was difficult on that. So that's how I chose the plan. All those guys agreed to it. And when it came down to the time, William, I just felt my goal has always been, and I had shared this with the church for 3 years now. I want to be able to step away to when our church is financially in an incredible position or completely out of debt and have zero facility issues, so that when the new man comes in, he has a whiteboard in which to work with. And he can go right to that whiteboard, begin to pray about the vision that God has for him. No impediments, nothing else he's got to deal with. Just where is it that God wants to take this church for its next step? That is why I did the capital campaign for the worship center, because that would have been an albatross around his neck. So I kind of took the bullets on that one, but it was an incredible experience. We named the capital campaign Next, and a part of Next was I got to introduce the concept of the next pastor. So in 2018, I remember preaching the sermon, and it was like this hush over the crowd. It's like they hadn't thought about it before. I quoted your book, Every Pastor's an Interim Pastor. And I said, sometime I'm going to be stepping away, and we just need to make sure that this building is complete, and that he's got the flexibility to go to 2 services, 3 services, wherever he wants to do. And let's get it ready. Let's get it ready. And so that was it.
It's so well done. You have planned everything out. Now, what's really important and critical for listeners to grab hold of is, if you listen to what Danny said about every decision he made, he had big context behind it. Like, well, Dr. Carter did it this way, we learned, and then because of my time, we're going to do it this way. The big mistake, if you find somebody, when you're talking about succession, and somebody says to you, let me tell you the 5 easy steps, or the cookie cutter for that, or the 4 things you must do, run away. It is all so contextual. And after doing 2,000 leadership transitions and 2,000 churches, Let me just tell you, if you've seen one church, you've seen about one church. You know, they're all different, and you as the outgoing leader probably have insights nobody else will. You as the incoming leader need to look back and start gathering memories and taking those pictures so you can start building that compound interest. But man, Danny, I am so excited to be working with you on this, and I just think you've done a great job of planning, and somebody's going to have a really bright future there. Thank you for taking time to share with us today. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you, William. And we're excited working with you and excited about the future for our church.
Yeah. And if you want to know more, just go to shades.org and maybe we'll do a sunglasses giveaway. Who knows? But it could be. But go to shades.org or check out the posting that we have on our website about that search. More importantly, take a look at Next. It's not just a building campaign. It's actually the name of the book. And we are relaunching a new edition of that book. Danny mentioned the book came out. It came out about 6 years ago. We did about 300 new case studies, added 150 pages of new research, got it all ready to go, released it, and then there decided to be a pandemic right during the release of the book. Not a good thing. So it's getting relaunched even this month, and you can go to nextpastor.com and see a whole lot of research to try and help you get ready, because if you're a pastor, you're an interim pastor. Danny, thank you so much for joining us today. God bless you.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you, William.
And if you want to get notes from today's show, just go to vandercast.com, give us your email. We'll send you all the links. You can read about Danny and all the great work he's done in Shades and outside of Shades, and find out what's coming up next. God bless you all. We'll talk again soon.